I appreciate y'all coming out. And when we started talking about this topic, I didn't think it was going to be, I thought, we'll do this on remote because it's a trend I've observed. We're benefiting from it. Charleston is. Then the story comes out in the Post and Courier about people moving to southern cities. But what triggered that was an email that I sent to the Post and Courier about an article that was released by Harvard study, and that was actually came to me from Liz. So I sent the Liz, study on to the Post and Courier, and I said, hey, you may want to take a look at this because we're beneficiaries of this. More and more people are kind of working remote teams. I'm not here to talk economic strategy, but it is part of economic strategy. And then I went online and I'm like, oh my God, there's just a wealth of information. And at the very least, if you guys can't even remember, this is one you'll remember, just go to remote.co, and that will give you a tremendous amount of information about working remote. They had 17 stats, and I pulled it down. I'm going to talk about those, introduce these guys, and then we're going to hear from them. But this is a little different because how many folks here, how many of the audience are working remote? I'm just curious.
Holy cow.
This is crazy. That's like 40%. The audience. And so the second part is kind of the questions I'm going to be asking. The first part is these guys. But here's just some, out of 17 stats, I just kind of picked up 8. Working remote, first of all, according to a Stanford study, can lead to astonishing productivity. And then I'm going to go down it increases employee retention. It helps increase workforce diversity. It reduces costs for both employers and employees, workers. It improves mental and physical health. It can help close the gender gap in technology. It benefits the environment. It's expanding to traditional, and this is interesting, it's expanding to traditional industries, only because traditional industries, in my opinion, are becoming more advanced manufacturing, not just manufacturing. And it's gaining traction here to stay. From a gaining traction standpoint, last year, the U.S. Census Bureau reported that 5.2% of the workforce is working remote right now in the U.S. And that's up from 5% year over year. 0.2%, that's astounding when they're looking at the workforce. So the way we broke this out today is I've had the good fortune, I've known these guys for a little while. Will sitting in the middle, he did present a couple of months back, but Will's amazing. He is kind of in a sweet spot. A company that's based in Ames, Iowa. Will decides he'd like to work from Charleston. He's building a team. When I met Will about 18 months ago, 20 months ago, he was 2 of them. Today they're at 14 on their way to about 40 employees, all software engineering. Great example. So there's a tremendous amount of insight that can be learned from Will. I got Chris Wilhite sitting over here next to me. Chris was formerly a senior engineer at Pocket Doc, and today works for DataStax, which is based in Santa Clara, California. And on the far end, you've got Ted Beeling. Ted's probably known to many of you guys. He was at Spark and then worked for Google for many years at the data center, and then decided to work for GitHub. So Ted also works remote, and Will's in the building with the team, and these 2 guys work remote. We're seeing more and more of Ted. Comes in and kind of pops up a little bit of co-working. So with that, that's just a brief introduction. I want to get right into the topics. As I said, it's kind of broad, and we've got an hour to 50 minutes to kind of run through a lot of this stuff. So the first question I have is, when you're working remote, whether it's a team or an individual, how do you feel connected to the overall mission of the company when it's as far away as California? So I think that's, there's culture, there's these stand-ups basically with all the groups and that kind of thing, and if you fundamentally believe that communication is not just verbal communication, it's also nonverbal communication. So you get into it. So I'm just, we'll start basically with Ted on, as an individual working, remote, and then kind of work our way down this way. So Ted, do you want to lead off?
Thanks, Ernest. It's great to be here, and thanks everybody for coming out and spending your morning here. I'm excited to be here. So your question, Ernest, was about communication and sort of building maybe corporate rapport. I'll maybe coin a phrase, and I think every company has a struggle, whether your employee base is work from home or whether you have a distributed team or not. And I think in my experience, is more common for teams to be distributed than not, from things I've done, at least in software, and that's just sort of my lens I view things through. And when I was at other companies, we would have big corporate meetings, and I would never meet these people who are presenters, but they're at the head office, and I'm at a company facility, right, with a team locally, but the things we do are by video still. And so right now I work at home, primarily. It's my primary office. I try to get out of the house, which is important. So I come to places like this, or coffee shop for a few hours, things like that. But everything is by video, and video has gotten very good, and there are several good video conferencing platforms now. And so between that, because sometimes you have to have a synchronous meeting. We use very heavy asynchronous communication patterns with chat, and so we use GitHub to build GitHub. I did another talk about that you can see the video of in the old space a while back. But that in and of itself is a collaboration and communication platform for teams. So we use that. There are other good options. And just kind of being honest about like when is it time to have an email or a chat message versus, hey, it's time for synchronous communication. Especially if there's an emotional stake. You really have to have that real-time chat. And, I think, Ernest, you talked on rapport and sort of understanding a person a little bit, did you, in your question? And, I'm listening to Malcolm Gladwell's new book. I think it's called Strangers, but it's about talking to strangers and the sometimes terrible and there are many extreme cases of fatal consequences where people who are strangers misunderstand intentions and bad things happen. Really lifted from the headlines. There are a lot of things in this book. It's fascinating. It's not an easy listen, but it's thought-provoking, so just it's for a mature audience. But in the business world, certainly I find myself doing this, you have to kind of put on a face, right? It's not that you're lying to people, but you have to speak and treat people a certain way regardless of how you feel internally. I have that struggle, let's be honest. I mean, it is a learned skill to do that. Being remote, you really have to magnify that, I think, because you know people so little. At least that's my experience. So to sort of quickly create that camaraderie so that we can all come together and everybody be happy and feel safe and so on.
Well,
I may have also answered other questions as well.
Yeah, I mean, how do you want me to?
So you've got a team here,
Yeah.
right? So Will's part of Workiva, public traded company, that's distributed all from New York, headquartered in Ames, Iowa, distributed in Iowa. Denver, New York,
Phoenix.
Jackson, no?
I don't know, Mark's got a shirt right now with all the offices on it. There's a lot.
But what's interesting is that Marty is here, the CEO happens to be here for 2 days. Met him yesterday, and it's amazing how much how Will represents. There's a seamless kind of culture between Will, the CEO of the company, and between Marty and Will, who's here. So how do you? I mean, the question again, how do you create with the remote team? How do you create the culture that is reflective of the overall parent?
Yeah, well, I think it starts with, I guess in our case, you have to have the that initial kind of instantiation of that culture, right? And like in our case, that was, probably Dustin and myself, because we brought that with us. We sort of grew up in the company, in that, you sort of internalize the philosophy of how you operate and the character of the company and the way you do things, and then if you do that over a long enough period of time, you kind of that becomes part of who you are as well. But I think with remote stuff, if you're building remote teams, it would have been extraordinarily difficult, for example, to build a successful team here if it didn't begin with the seed of some people who kind of brought that with them. It's extraordinarily difficult. And we've tried to do that before. You hire a team fully remote where everybody's brand new, and it sometimes doesn't work. you were talking about the communication stats, and I always think those are really interesting. I think there's different studies that report different numbers, but I think the pretty commonly agreed to numbers are it's about 55%, humans read, and interpret 55% body language. It's like 38% tone and only 7% words. And interestingly, like the world is moving towards, you described asynchronous communication, which lacks entirely in tone and body language, which means now I've got, the most inefficient mechanism of communication, by a very, very wide margin, and that becomes the dominant mechanism of communication. So, I think video is really important. I totally agree about that, about, having people connect, being able to see people's faces, being able to, even just seeing their environment or their dog or their kid walk by in a camera, those things are all, they help you kind of have authentic experiences with people, which I think, helps bridge the distance gap. I don't know if that was a full enough answer.
Chris,
but
what's your, how do you stay connected to that?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult problem, and I can't speak for my organization, but generally you see a lot of organizations try to create, like you said, authentic human experiences. But the reality of it is working remote is very transactional, and it does help to have a certain personality type and look for that type of person. Like, there are efforts you can take. We do a lot of off-sites, for example, or there's lots of travel. You see each other, but ultimately, when it comes to the work itself, you are not going to have that emotional dimension as much. Which some people, it's not. It doesn't matter. Some people that's okay. They go to an office and experience that, but others really need it. So. Some companies, mine included, try to create experiences, even outside of work, like so you go and meet with other people or meet with people in your field, So you can create emotional experiences in other ways. I don't know if that's a good answer or not. But yeah, I've found that works pretty well, actually, is to be pretty transactional. That's not a touchy-feely answer.
not always a negative thing, yeah.
But it is business. So.
Yeah, so while we're talking about transactional, let's talk about accountability. How is accountability measured, on both sides?
You have to, if you're primarily remote, you have to have things that you can measure from the top down. You can't rely on intangibles like you can when you're all working together. We're all in the same boat and we're all rowing. You really need, from the very top level, you need to have things that you can measure and move towards, weekly, quarterly, down to the smallest unit. So people use OKRs or other things to do that. But that's really probably the most important thing in terms of making sure you're on course. Because otherwise, it's really hard to put into words, but when you're all working in the same office on the same team, you really just kind of feel how things are going. Mm-hmm. Depending on what position you're in. If you're in leadership, you can always kind of take the temperature of where you are and be like, we're kind of doing okay, But you don't have that at all remote. So
this is just observation from seeing about 100 companies, many of which are remote over the last 10 years. I want to ask Will the question. So my sense of it is that if you're working as part of a remote team and not part of the corporate environment, your accountability goes way up, way up. So I want you to speak to that, Will, and basically there's really very little room for error. There's no place to hide because the remote team is seen as one. They're not seen as, what does Charleston produce for us today? It's not what's the gang in Charleston produce. So can you speak to that?
Yeah, well, so look, it's really exactly, it's just a slight extension of the concept we were just talking about with human-to-human conversation, right? Now you're talking like team to company or team to team, where the team is represented in a soundbite or an OKR or KPI, right? Not as like a unit of people that work together and row together and do all those things, right? And so effectively the same concept applies where, what would be analogous to body language and tone is gone, and now what's left are results, black and white, entirely transparent. I think with us, I think the co-location and the concept of whether remote works or not is largely a function of the type of mission, the style of mission. I think it works really well in established companies, even for us, right? There's facets of our business that are very well established. The kind of operational side of that is pretty dialed in. We've been doing it for a long time. And so it kind of facilitates that transactional style of work where, it's okay to kind of plug people in here and there, and we kind of have a good system to run it. When you're doing like what we're doing, and Doug can speak to this, I think Chris, you mentioned like the concept of like how it's like natural to work with people, and I think it's a good analogy. It's like improvisational jazz, right? You got like 14 people in a room kind of all doing that together, and when you're in growth mode and you're kind of in acceleration or create mode, I think that's remarkably difficult to do well. If I said, okay, there's a team of 14 people here, they're all remote. Here's a team of 14 people here, they're all co-located. Same challenge, who's going to get to commercial viability first? It's the co-located team every time by a wide margin, because there's none of that conversation or decision impedance. It's just like you just kind of roll through it, and you do that really fast. So part of our strategy, and I think part of a broader strategy for the company about where you co-locate, when you can do remote, is about the mission itself. And so for something that was growth oriented, it was really important to me, to hire everybody here and to have a lot of the key people in the office. And then, what happens was kind of interesting, and this is maybe has a cultural effect too, but you find teams kind of develop like this magnetism, right? And the magnetism is largely a function of like the size of the unit and how good the unit is. Like the bigger the unit, the greater the magnetism between units. And so, for a single remote person working with a team of 400, there's very little magnetism, right? That's hard. So you're like on an island. But a team of 20 compared with a team of 20, they both have kind of their own magnetism that pulls them together. And so there's like, you got to fight through those early days, when you're remote, like we were when we were 2 or 3 or 5 people. It was extraordinarily difficult because we just didn't have that presence. You got to kind of fight through that to get the scale you need to then really have a unit that kind of fits well with the parent, and you've still got the independence and speed and all the other things that you look for.
I think the accountability for us, at least at the projects I've been involved with, it's fairly fluid and informal, and I think our workflow it has to be very intentional. You have to be clear, and in fact, I think it's actually literally a core value, like a documented core value at GitHub. We write things down, so because we have to. But then there's actually a benefit. It seems like sort of a burden. Well, I'd rather just chat at someone's cubicle, and then we have an understanding, and then we all go back. But now I got to write stuff down. That seems like an extra step. Well, isn't it better? And wouldn't you rather do it anyway? So then next week, well, we talked about this, and we said you were going to do these 3 things, and I said I was going to do this, and we were going to come together, and then things didn't really work, but there's no confusion, or not maybe as much potential for confusion, I'll say. Just that clarity and the intentionality about the communication patterns that you have to have. There's a strength in them, I think, too. But as far as metrics and stuff, that's not my thing. I don't know. If you guys ever figure out how to objectively quantify the impact of a software engineer, go write a paper, you'll probably get an award for it.
Yeah, well, I think that's the same. That's very much why it's difficult with a single person, right? I think it's much easier with a team because you can measure at a company scale. You can measure team output way better than you can measure individual output. So, I think when people look at our organization, for example, we've got a set of kind of unit economics that are tied to that core business. We've got a product that's connected to this team in this place, and so our output becomes very measurable because they're big things that we achieve as a team, even though they're little incremental things that we achieve as individuals. Mm-hmm. But
yeah, software engineering is also a weird case. You kind of touched on it a little bit. It's the model is more of a sports team and not a assembly line. Like you may have a team of 100 people, and one person is basically going to carry 95 of those people, generally speaking. And if your organization isn't like that, then you need to find that one.
Yeah.
Because otherwise you just don't have a functional, I mean, you know what I mean? There's just not a top-down.
That's so true.
You know what I mean? That's the model of how these things work, which is why you say it's hard to quantify, because it is hard to quantify. It's very, yeah, I mean, there's like one dude that does most of the work, or lady,
Yep.
you know. Not most of the work, but, you know, lays the foundation for
You gotta have a
everything
chief.
else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This is Will, you're going to be heading to this. Right now, we got, you're managing software engineers, these guys, software engineers,
Yep.
actually working remote. What happens when you have cross disciplines and then you work in a remote team and the corporate corporate basically wants things a certain way, different disciplines work. So I've seen what I thought were really top-notch people come and go in here,
Mm-hmm.
and that's because they couldn't keep the pace, the pace at which corporate, required, and so, but clearly the creative process is different from development processes.
Yeah.
So I'm just curious about that, because you're going to be adding now business units,
Yeah.
separate from just pure software engineering. Are they will they be managed by you, or is that?
Yeah, so that's a really interesting question. It's one that we're still kind of iterating through that. I think a lot of the way we run our business, we have to kind of run our business the way we build our software, right? I mean, it's like, well, we're going to think a lot about this thing, and we're going to, try to get the people who really have meaningful input together. We're going to make a decision. We're going to understand that we're wrong immediately after we made the decision, because we always are, and then we're just going to measure the response, and we're going to try to fix it, as quickly as possible. It's like, you take your best aim, you're going to hit somewhere on the wall, and then once we hit the wall, we're going to get really good feedback from our people and from our teams and from our leaders, and then, okay, now I can kind of get precise, right? And so we just sort of iterate our way to that precision. But yeah, I think it's interesting because we're struggling. One of the challenges is deciding, do you go kind of heavily matrixed, or do you stack people vertically? And there's really interesting implications to doing both sides of that. So it's a little bit of both, Ernest. I think there's facets of our running a scaled operation that are incredibly efficient because they're at scale. So those things we just want to borrow because we don't want to have to reinvent that. And that would be silly. There's other things that require it's kind of like the co-location thing. There's so much precision and ductility in the message and the way that it gets delivered that you kind of have to have a little bit different reporting structure initially just to be able to kind of get something off the ground, right? So things like marketing or product marketing are things where even if you don't have direct accountability in those scenarios, if you've got kind of a matrixed organization where people are committing, hey, this person, yes, they're part of my organization, but they're aligned with your mission for now. That's, I think, the right way to do it. So it's a little bit of both, and we're kind of trying to figure that out. I think at scale, I think we've got some models that work really well. Again, depending on what you're trying to do. Is it geographic expansion? Is it new product? Is it new product line? Is it all of those things have some effect on, there's not one model that you can just plug and play everywhere.
Chris, this is more for you. When you're working remote as individuals, to what extent do you have, from a management standpoint, do you just get these mandates of what we would like to do, the direction, the generals are calling it, and you guys are in the field of basically just executing. Talk to me a little bit about that. To what extent is it a two-way communication? It's like, hey guys, wait a minute, there's a better way to do this. Especially, you and your team's huge. So I'm just curious, how do you basically break through the noise of somebody who's dominant sitting in corporate saying, no, this is the way we're going to go, and although your approach, Chris, might be way better than the approach. Can you speak to that a little bit, from remote, Chris?
Oh, sure. And yeah, my approach is always best. But, no, I mean, my organization, they're, and my role in particular is in a part of an organization that is basically R&D. I mean, I don't know if you call it R&D is kind of a bad word, but I mean, my job and my team's mission is to try things to drive adoption of our products. So we try things and fail all the time. So our mission is actually pretty broad. It's get more people on the product, get younger developers on the product, that kind of thing. So we were given a broad mission. It's up to us for tactics and on how to.
So you feel your voice is equal on the team to everybody else. And by the way, how big is the team?
the team I'm on, like, so I'm on part of a bigger team, but I'm actually the only person in my little unit.
Yeah.
So, but I am part of a bigger team that's maybe a dozen that represents, I think, 300 or 400 people under that. But so yeah, it's I feel part of that team because I mean, there's sections of that I work with. I work with different people in that organization, but yeah, even then the mandates are kind of broad, and and it's up to you to show how everything is working or going to work. But there's very little, other than just kind of maybe some editorial process, there's very little in terms of follow these steps or even during the editorial process. Like there's, you know.
How do you get user feedback to kind of prove what you're doing?
I mean, if it's an end user product, it's up to you to put the metrics in and track it and measure it and report on it. There are other teams that will do that for you. I mean, we have marketing, we have a pretty traditional structure. So if it's that kind of thing, you can defer to them. If it's an internal product, they'll tell you pretty quickly. Like, yeah.
Ted?
I think as far as corporate direction, I think that's kind of what I heard in your question. I have had periods of time where there is a very specific mission for a finite duration, and we need to have X, Y, and Z capabilities. Everybody work together and figure out how to do it. And there's been other times where my work on an individual basis has been completely open and really at my discretion, which is maybe unusual. But there's really a stress in that, because then I need to come up with something. It's like, hey, I'm working on this product, I'm part of this team, and we're working together, but no one's really telling us for this short period of time, specifically, like, here's the big X. If we have X, then, this customer list would be much happier, right? And it's a very fluid environment at our company, which I think is a lot of fun. I would much rather have the time when there is clear direction, because I can do a lot of things, right? If somebody tells me what to do, then I know how to be successful. It's a tremendous luxury to be told what to do, honestly. At some
That's
level,
very true.
At some level of abstraction, and it's very hard, for everyone to figure out, well, what is the thing to be done with a high level of clarity and specificity and defining outcomes. I mean, computers are easy. Honestly, you tell a thing what to do and it does it every time. It's not really easy. It's intellectual, but it's not. It's a solved problem, right? We know how to do it. Discovering what is it's product development. Honestly, it's what it is. That I see that as very challenging, and I have a lot of respect for the people for whom that is their focus, because it's so nebulous, right? But speaking from my perspective as an individual contributor, to be part of an effort with a team of others, particularly being remote, it's very helpful to know not only from the top of the company, sort of the vision and corporate level OKRs. A lot of times I'll work on something that does not directly relate to a top level OKR as a hierarchy, right? And that is not actually an anti-pattern with OKRs if you read the original book. It's healthy to do that. But to have some level of, if it's OKRs or some other system of identifying either as a trend, we are going to improve this area of whatever product in order to achieve, whatever it is. To be part of that effort and to know kind of your mission and kind of your marching orders at different levels of abstraction. I think that it's a breakdown between this is not my model, but the how, the what, and the why. I'm really good at how with the things I do, and I work with other people who also are. Where I need direction, otherwise I'll just make something up, and it'll be good, but it'll be helpful, but it won't be maybe the thing that we should have done because of opportunity cost. But to have someone else figure out the why from a very broad level, and then the what, if the thing behaved this way, then these customers would be, incrementally benefited. Great. we're going to take our few people and work on the how, and we'll get back to you. So to have that, I think is helpful.
That's super well stated.
Thank you.
So from your standpoint, you had all the autonomy because you had the idea for the product, corporate bought it, and then you started to go about it.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little about that. From your team standpoint, the unit really kind of drove the product.
Yeah, yeah, that's fair. I think, but to your point, I mean, I think that was expertly said.
You're very kind.
Because I think I've felt that at every level in a company as you're trying to scale it. Like, it's a really challenging. It seems trivial. Like, well, just tell us what to do and we'll go do it. It's like it's a non-trivial task to figure out what is the right thing to do in the right order of precedence that's going to create value for our customers, which is ultimately all we're trying to do, right? So our mission is very concise in one way. I mean, from broad direction, it's like, well, we just have to create value for our customers. Why is this so darn hard to do, right? Why is this so hard to figure out what it is that you want to build, or for what purpose or what problem you want to solve? Because customers have hundreds of problems, and you can get easily distracted by the breadth of them. And so it's I don't have a good answer. I think there's a huge amount of experience and instinct involved in it. I think you complement that with the depth of analysis, the quality of analysis that you're capable of performing, and then understand like the error rates and the uncertainty in that. Because I think all too often people can sit down and like scribble down a business plan. And it's like, great, if we just do everything just like this, it's going to work. No, it's not. Never works like that, right? There's huge uncertainty, and half the stuff you think is going to work one way won't, and then half the stuff that you thought was going to fail utterly will be a great success, and then you just kind of start fitting the pieces together over time. So I think kind of circling back to your question, one thing that makes us unique is that experientially, I have been at every part of the business. I was educated as a mechanical engineer. I was a practicing engineer for a while. I spent 8 years selling. That was, a huge part of my career was professional selling of enterprise software. If you want to build anything, you better learn how to do it, right? I mean, that's the most powerful skill you can have and develop if you're building, whether it's teams or products or companies or any of those things. So I went off and learned how to sell. And then when I got out of sales, I kind of took a sidestep, in some ways even a backstep, because to me, that sort of experiential knowledge was much more valuable than income. So I got a chance to work in product marketing and be terrible at it when I started, and kind of learn how to be better at it. And then I did, launch operations, and I learned how to be terrible at that because I was when I started. And then we got a little bit better at it. And so we had, between myself and Dustin, who, is kind of one of our really core anchor technical people here in Charleston, who both had spent a lot of time in the company and had a really good breadth of experience. That's what allowed us to kind of create direction, set the course, know what we needed to do. I spent a lot of time in front of clients. I had hundreds and hundreds of meetings with people, and it heard over the years what they wanted and didn't want. And again, it starts as a really abstract concept or theme or mission, and then you start kind of just iterating your way there. And then it's interesting, I kind of reflect on how ambiguous it was when we started and how precise we've gotten over 18 months, 20 months or something. And it doesn't feel that would, like it, the intention was in the process of how we work. It's how we do what we do, not necessarily what we do. And the how we do what we do leads to the what we do, I think, in a way that, helps us get to that really tight product. Now it's very convergent. Now we have a really tight mission. We know exactly what we're doing. You see that in, an acceleration in all sorts of dimensions, but, especially in customer adoption.
Ernest, can I interject a question?
Please.
It's not normally how panels run,
Sure.
but I don't like rules.
Oh, man, we're going to get along great.
You're in the right place.
Thank you. I know. This topic of motivation, I think, is fascinating in the workplace. And there are a couple books around about this. Daniel Pink has one, Drive, that I found insightful. And just this difference between extrinsic and intrinsic motivation. You guys are probably seeing the same thing. I just keep thinking about, in a distributed team or a remote team, whether it's work from home or something like you, where there's like sort of kind of a satellite office kind of model, what I'm hearing, or these different models, how do you, across these remote communication methods, create, I'm going to assume the extrinsic motivation is taken care of. People are paid well, they
Yeah,
feel safe,
yeah, yeah.
things like that. They
Right.
know they're in a good company, things that, that's not
Yep.
the level. But, how do you create that fire of, hey, we're going to go and we're going to run together and I'm going to wake up and nobody's going to talk to me in the morning, but I'm going to go to my desk and I'm going to open my work and do it. And then, how do you sort of create that intrinsic across the remote? I've had managers in Europe
Yeah.
and it worked great.
Yeah. I don't know if I can speak to it as much as managing a remote team, because most of my team's here. But again, I'm going to go back to the thing that we talked about at the very beginning, which is like the kind of communication model. And at least from my perspective, kind of interested in Chris's perspective too, but I look at it the way that I look at it, not that everybody does, but I think the reinforcement, and there's two things that I think motivate teams, and this is what motivated me when as I've been on teams over the years, is that I appreciated two critical things in my leaders. One was authenticity and the other was transparency. So tell me what's going on with the business and why, and be authentic. And why? Well, because if you're authentic and you're principled and you behave in a certain way consistently, consistency is incredibly valuable as an employee and as a leader, because people know what to expect, right? It's like, well, it's unambiguous how this person is going to respond or how this is going to go. And look, maybe this is not going to be a fun conversation, but at least we know what the conversation is going to be. Or maybe it's going to be a great conversation because we excelled and we were really performant. So it's like that predictability is really important. And then I think reinforcement of cause. So we're doing what we're doing. Why are we doing it? Well, we're doing it to create customer value. Well, how do we reinforce that? How do we close that feedback loop, right? Because like in a mechanical system, right, those closed loops work better because I'm siphoning off that feedback stream and feeding it back in to create precision in everything I do. And I think the same thing applies to team mission and all that kind of stuff. So we talk a ton about the business in our office. This office is all engineering for the most part. I'm technically the only business guy in it. But that's a huge part of what we talk about, because I want everybody to understand why we're doing what we're doing, for what outcome, and then be able to see, because we did it this way, look at what we were able to achieve together, right? And it's like black and white, so it kind of reinforces the. Anyway, sorry, it was a long-winded answer.
From an achievement and accountability standpoint, it's interesting. Last week, Will had told me they booked more revenue in 1 month than they did in the previous 18. So that's kind of validation for a remote team and the value they bring to the organization. So, and what I'm seeing basically with his corporate team in town, every time I come in, I just see this. You get all the leeway you want because the success you brought to the company, and they are publicly traded, so it's it's on a quarterly basis. What have you done for me lately applies.
Got to perform
more aggressively than any. Before I move on to the second part, I thought it'd be good for questions from the audience. Basically, let's take about 3 to 5 questions for these guys, and then we can kind of move on to the second part. So yeah.
Chris, you specifically mentioned a certain type of person makes a good remote worker. Can you talk a little bit more about what that means to you?
Sure, and maybe just to continue on what they were talking about. I mean, if someone's not clearly self-motivated or intrinsically motivated after going through, the school system we have in our society and like developing shame and guilt and all these natural things that make you do things, then that's not a person that's going to work. Like you can't. I mean, you're not going to make that into someone, right? If you're not going to hire someone in their mid-20s that's not self-motivated or like that, you just don't hire that person.
Any age, right?
Totally agree.
I mean, not any age. I mean, I think if you're 18, I mean, you still can still do a little work with that, but.
So you're talking about hiring somebody to work remotely.
Sure.
So there's all this motivation internally. How would you know that when you're hiring them?
Well, you talk to them, and I mean, even if they have no job experience, you can ask questions that kind of reveal, why they're doing what they're doing. I mean, it's not easy.
Do you think someone who is early career can succeed as, I'll say specifically work from home, just to take other forms of remote out of it? Right?
Sure.
Yeah, if it's their first job, second job, maybe they're new to this kind of work, maybe before.
Yeah, I mean, it go really well or really badly. I mean, they don't have any bias, they don't have any preconditions of what working is like, so, but they probably played a lot of online games or, have had the experience of doing those kind of things. So, current generation, I think probably work pretty well. But I mean, at the same time, it may not. I mean, just getting someone used to being in a corporate organization and dealing with politics and how to interact with people in that environment is hard.
Yeah.
For their first job, that's like most of their first job is, unless you get a bunch of kids the same age that start a company, and whatever, anything goes, right? So.
Okay.
Yeah, that drive is important.
Yeah, Ted, you mentioned the sort of what and why folks in product development and how once you get to how, it's really easy for you. What do you find are the best people that on the product development side that can turn things into how for you that makes it really easy? Maybe a good and what also doesn't work that gets you to that place where your team can execute?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think the biggest component there is to form a relationship between engineering and product development and really build a rapport where it's not dictatorial. It's very much two-way, and there's a lot of stuff about like estimating and things like that. I'm not even thinking about it on that level. Just at a high level, I care about the customer. I love our customers. Sure. They pay me. How couldn't I love them, right? I'm grateful for every single one of them, big ones and small ones. So, this idea that like, I'm an engineer. I don't care about the customer. I'm not customer. It's fictional.
wrong, yeah.
It's wrong, and
Absolutely.
nowadays maybe people used to get away with that. You can't. No, it's fictional. So everybody has to think about the customer, and not everybody's exposed to the customer. I'm not saying that every back-end, kernel developer should be in customer meetings necessarily. Maybe, but it's not a hard and fast. But I'm not saying we should do that. But my expectation within those relationships, as an IC, senior engineer, is that I can have a conversation with a product manager type of person or someone representing that function, and for them to represent the customer in kind of a broad sense, in the aggregate, for us, and then for us to ask questions and really understand what they want, and for them to not be too specific about the implementation, because it's not the field, and there's some overlap. Maybe they've done some programming, and maybe they've done something, or maybe they've been a senior software engineer, possibly. But it's all situational. So again, just to have that rapport and camaraderie, and viewing it as kind of a unified team, and not I'm going to tell you what to do, and you're going to tell me how long it's going to take, and then I'm going to tell you that you failed. This is not. I have not had this experience. I'm grateful, but I hear things.
You nailed it
from other places.
I think
I have
for
seen
people
it.
that have, yeah.
I've seen it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not making it up.
There's a question?
Yes, half of my team is co-located and half will be working remotely. What can I do as a manager to ensure we don't build this culture of us and them, and to keep those that are working remotely feeling like they're part of the team?
Step one is don't stop asking that question every day. Thank you for asking it.
I mean, clicks form in business, whether you're remote or local, is the same thing you would do if everybody's working locally. But like he said, you have to pay attention to it if it's important to you.
Do they all have the same function?
No.
What kind of functions are they?
Some of them are working with academic research and some are working with startups.
Wow.
It's very different.
Yeah, I mean, I would think strongly about like how to communicate purpose, right? I think that's the thing that galvanizes people and teams. Again, if you're on an island and you have purpose, like you would call it drive or motivation or that intrinsic thing, I think people that are motivated that way, the things that motivate them, myself included, are very rarely money or time off or office, environment, or those are not motivating. People that are wired for achievement, they're motivated by purpose. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? And what do we expect to achieve? And then what's the outcome if we achieve that for all of the people involved in that effort, right? That, understanding that and being able to communicate that well, whether you're co-located or remote, I think you have to do that because that is what galvanizes teams.
Yeah, that's probably the best advice is to know individually why each person is there, because I work for money, like I don't need any other stuff. So just know why they're there
It's an honest room.
and talk to them, and because not everybody needs to be friends.
Yeah.
It's work.
But let me challenge you on that real quick.
Sure.
So, all things being equal money-wise, then what's next? What's the next priority? Two companies say, we're going to pay you the exact same amount of money. Why would you pick one versus the other?
Make more money.
Yeah. What, I mean, yeah. I mean,
No. Take money
that
out.
doesn't exist.
Take money out. Benefit like all.
I don't know.
All the
I mean,
level.
Sure.
Stuff
I
is
mean,
the
I
same,
don't.
right?
I wouldn't go work for somebody I found morally reprehensible or something. Like,
Right.
certainly, that's a factor.
You're like a.
You know, yeah, not complete mercenary.
I was gonna say you're kind of mercenary. You got a mercenary vibe.
No, but yeah, I mean, I think those things are important. But I mean, in terms of just, no one's going to see it the same way. No one's ever going to see the company
Yeah.
through the same way. I mean, you're going to want to try to drive a top-down vision of, this is our mission and this is why we're good or better than the other. But I mean, ultimately, people are there for self-interest, for some self-interest reasons. So just
Yeah.
identify what it is, and
Yeah.
you know that'll
It's
keep them interested.
Yeah, the communication of how the self-interest.
So
goes.
so this is my last question, and then, we've got to.
I have one quick point to get back here about the
Go ahead.
manager question, because I think it's a great topic, and I mean there's like a whole conference about remote work, of course, and there are many resources about this. I think for me as an employee, just because your question that I heard was about, as a manager, how can you kind of really drive and support the performance of remote workers, if I kind of digested you right. There's some tactical things, right, where regular one-on-ones that happen weekly, even 30 minutes, an hour is better. Take the time. Any employee, but especially a remote employee, the relationship between you and your direct HR manager, even in a matrix environment, or even especially in a matrix environment, is critical. It has to be the number one relationship in the company between you and who you report to. Besides the money stuff, that's honestly the reason number 8. But just to know that someone has your back, and a manager. And I've been grateful to work for great managers at GitHub, and to know they support you and they care about you individually. To know that you're succeeding on not just your workplace goals, but that you are satisfied in the workplace, so that whatever it is that you do outside the workplace, because the reason we work is to support those things, right?
Yeah.
To really have just the number one job of a manager, particularly of remote employees, is to explicitly build that relationship, right? I think it's the main skill of a manager, and I'm talking about like first level manager, maybe mid level, that too, but then other things, right? To know that I can ping on chat my manager and to be heard, normal relationship stuff, I mumbled. That I can be heard, that I can maybe vent for a minute, not vulgarly, but this thing is really getting me and I'm feeling angry because it's so messed up and why can't they, whatever, and I have to be like, cool, I hear you, what would you like me to do? I'm good now, thanks very much. Sometimes you need that, right? In Ernst, you talked about kind of what I call managing by working around, right? And walking around, and it's the same kind of thing, right? You might have that conversation, informal, outside of a meeting, so the ability to do that, and to know that they are as an employee, to know that your manager is an advocate for you within the company, of course, money, performance, reviews, raises, bonus, equity, all that kind of stuff, to help you, because it's a game, it is, and there are rules, and they keep changing, and you have to follow it, and what is the way that I'm going to succeed? Because we're there for money, and to be intrinsically motivated. Like, why not both?
Yeah, why not both?
But kind of summarily, to answer Christine's question, and what I hear you guys saying is, there's one standard. There's no different standard for remote. There's no,
It's the same. I think you hit the nail on the head, Ernest. And I like that you said that. I agree, and it's magnified remote. It's so much more important.
Right.
consistently, right? And you talk about consistency.
I think
right?
the productivity is on a remote employee is higher because, you know, the stats bear it out, is because it is magnified. I would feel more accountable if I was just being, you have the sense that, you know, you're being watched.
You got to kind of prove yourself.
Everybody
with
thinks,
that.
you know, you're away from the mothership, but the reality is the mothership becomes omnipresent in your life. You know, I mean, I'm a great
You're not
example.
wrong.
You know, I'm a great example. The CDC belonged to the city.
Yeah.
You know, the city was nowhere physically near me, but they were omnipresent because I knew what the mission was, right? So if I worked in the bureaucratic pit, basically, I wouldn't feel as accountable as, you know, now it's all on me to produce. I wanted to kind of just switch up to this, and I have one more question, but just in the essence of time. So we know, here's a couple of trends for you guys, right? So I was walking down the hall one day, and this is why, this facility is absolutely amazing. And one of the guys who work in Silicon Valley, and he challenged me, and he says, Ernest, gone are the days where you're going to have the 300-person software company, the blackboards and the benefit focuses, and now, Boomtown just kind of slipped into the category of 300 employees, from a distributed as well. So, and he says, I challenge you to tell me that you'll have the new companies will be more than 30 to 50 employees. And I just got through a conversation basically with Will a day earlier, talking about how they'll go to about 40. So in my mind, kind of the breach point was 50, and the sweet spot was basically, closer to 40 people. And there's a lot of factors. I don't want to get into all that right now. There's a lot of factors as to why, it's going there. So along those lines, one of the guys who was going to be here, but he couldn't because we switched the dates on him, was Barnes McLaurin, who used to be at Blackbaud and now runs the Workday team that has now grown to about 20 employees. Will they get to 40? Probably not. But the reality is that all around I'm seeing this validation pop up. The question I have for you guys, is this: that we know if 40% of the hands were raised saying we're working remote, then as an organization, we're starting to think about our new facilities. We've got West Edge coming online at the end of the year, and then the Charleston Tech Center, which is where all the focus is going to be permanently, because West Edge is, I affectionately refer to it as a temporary distraction, because it's not my thing. I'm just kind of helping the city kind of get it up. We're gonna accommodate. We're gonna have zones just for co-working folks who can kind of pop in, so the TEDs of this world can kind of pop in. The reality is that the level of intelligence I get from talking to TED is 10x times I can get from any consultant in this town. He's an employee.
You said it very figuratively.
Oh, great, should I? And these three guys basically.
Chris's ears perked up when you said that. His mercenary tendencies heard the 10X.
So, I can get Chris on the weekend when he wants to pop in and have a meeting and that kind of. So the question I have is, what can we do? What recognizing some of these things, and I can sit over here for an hour and tell you what are the patterns and trends, from front lines, which no consultant can give me. What are the things that we can do? What is important to you guys? Is it important to have, a non-chamber style invitation only for remote workers and co-workers and that, co-working teams and that kind of thing? Is it important, so I just want to know, without prompting anybody over here, what is important? But I can assure you that if we do anything, it'll be exactly like this. It's by invitation. You have to say you're coming, and you're only going to get admitted if you're part of that class of folks. So nobody's going to try and sell you any shit, that kind of thing. So that's the question I have. What can we as an organization do to enhance? I want more of you. I want more of your, you. This is high wage, national, we just published our wage survey. Why is it trending up? There's not only a shortage, but you've got more of these folks who are being paid national wages living in Charleston. That's why it's trending up. So I'm on the winning side of this equation. I don't worry about stagnation. I tell people, I just told somebody, I said, a reporter asked me, she says, about the strategy. I said, there is no strategy for the city. I said, the hotel wages have gone from $8 to $11.50 in 10 years. Is that a strategy? But yet, yesterday with our attorney in more hotels, you're like, oh, there's a hotel there, hotel there, hotel there. That's just terrible. What can we do as a community for you guys? Then I'll go at one time.
I would say a top-down approach and really raising awareness of the benefits of this, especially in Charleston where infrastructure is already overloaded as it is. The more people we can have working remotely, the better it is for the ecosystem. But some of that change has to happen from the top down.
I'll add, a lot of that's infrastructure too, drive infrastructure projects. So, we're techs, right? We rely on data, we rely on digital communications. Because there's a decided lack of that, especially in the neck area, going from Mount Pleasant to downtown to Jones Island to West Ashland. There's no, or very little high-end communications like that.
Can you explain a little more?
Well, you can drill it all the way straight down to, internet provider, right? Where's the last mile coming from? What can you get? What kind of bandwidth can you get? Because we went from 80 employees total, dropped down to 40, now we're back closer to 80 again. Those other 40 are all distributed. and they're all around the U.S. If I try to go and have, say, a in-the-round meeting style, even I've got a gig coming to my office. If I'm trying to drive that video stream,
Yeah.
it's lacking. Where do I go to get the next step of communications and data throughput? I like that. This is the first kind of event that I've done like this. I really am enjoying the give and take and the management sort of level. I'm very boots on the ground operation.
Yeah. I think that's great. I mean, and just so you know, I was on the phone for 30 minutes yesterday at Boomtown sometime in November. I got to look at the dates and we'll put it on my calendar. And if you came to this, you'll follow us on social media, you'll see it. So Comcast is going to announce complete upgrade, complete speed upgrade, all on fiber. That's coming next year. And I will tell you this, that I've had my share of challenges with Comcast, but we're right now a Comcast shop. I would say we average an outage basically once every other month, which is not acceptable when you have, but in fairness, this was a cost issue for us. We got to put in redundancies with AT&T. It was just cost prohibitive to get a gig connection. So we've got a gig coming in here. Speeds are very consistent, but we told him at the Charleston Tech Center that we will not entertain any providers who will have triple redundancy with fiber-only providers into the building. So it's going to become a showplace, and the companies that are in that building basically will benefit from that, completely scalable. And what's really interesting was AT&T said at our cost, because this is the only way they're going to get in, we're going to put a switch that basically converts your triple redundancy into an agnostic single system. And so you might be running video on Comcast, he might be running the conversation on AT&T, and the third one might be on Home Telecom. Those are the three providers.
Home Telecom will outpace all the other ones combined.
Home Telecom is pretty awesome.
What's that?
I said, Home Telecom will outpace the other two combined.
So I think that you have to be in my shoes 18 years ago when the CDC was started around what we don't have, and I was like, I call Atlanta and basically said, pay attention to what we have. So every step of the way, we've gotten better. And I think, I appreciate you in a very, the one thing you learn about this, it's not a politically correct organization. You can tell me exactly, and everybody here can share it and listen to it. You don't have to do it privately, because that's the goal, right? If we don't get better. So the question again is, how do we take, every time I interact with, Ted is basically now, mentoring an 18-year-old basically who's developing, is completely refactoring our Charleston Works platform and making it better. So we benefit from folks like this, the operational issues and that kind of thing. And I'm not opposed to kicking these guys. And so I said, okay, now here's the answer. Right? You're all providing the same thing. Now let's talk about the cost structure. Why is it I can get it cheaper in Atlanta? And we've got a facility at Beaufort. You talk about poor service. Welcome to the third world.
Wait, I have distributed workers that have a better internet connection than I do with a bilateral connection. Right.
So what I would say is, bring your expertise. We're always listening. Bring your expertise to us. Let's hear about it. And the reality is that we're the only organization that can pick up the phone and have all three of those guys in your office to talk about what they don't have and why. Right? We can do it in 24 hours.
I want to throw in an anecdote because I'm looking at people's time. We're talking about motivation and remote work, and I was sort of thinking about this the other day after Ernest, asked me to join the panel, and I used to work for the #1 company to work for, by these ratings, either nationally or globally, and I was very happy there. They were extremely good to me, and I was looking for a new role because I was, the core work I was doing, for me, it needed to be different, and I would have loved to stay with them, and I tried to find ways to do that, and it just wasn't an option. Because I wanted to stay in Charleston, and it was critical to do that. And honestly, it was family reasons, #1, but Charleston's an excellent city to live in, I think. And, I quit that company, which was kind of a bold move. And I went to another excellent company. GitHub is a top company to work for, I think. I don't know how they are in these official ratings, these surveys or whatever, but I think people are very happy working there. Because I could work remotely from Charleston, right? I said, well, okay, if I can't work here, what is the best job I can get for me living in Charleston? And I'm grateful that it's them. And, you know, I say it as an anecdote, but I'm not the only person with a story like that. So, you know, Charleston has special things about it, and we need to continue that and magnify the things that are our strengths as a community. And you know, certainly the things Ernest is saying is a part of that. And I think it'll continue to be a trend with people being here by choice instead of because they have to, because this is where the job is, where someone hired them to come to a desk every day. You know, how do we make people intrinsically motivated to be here, and then grow our community overall? That's it.
Just real quick, I mean, the city advertises like crazy for tourism. Maybe they should do a targeted advertising campaign for remote workers, because I don't know many remote workers that move here and then leave, right? And so the community and the more that are here, the better it gets. Maybe the city should be advertising a targeted advertising campaign for remote.
Yeah, I mean,
Best places to work,
Yeah.
not best places to visit.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and this is why I think the more have these conversations, over a glass of wine, just these ideas. Now, let me give you the mechanics behind what you just said. 99.9% of the dollars that are spent in marketing are driven by the CVB. Has gone from the equivalent of 1 million to 17 million. What do you think they're going to do? Their megaphone's about that big, and then you got the CRDA, which is the marketing arm, who really isn't basically espousing this trend that I've been watching for the last 3 years. This was an easy one, because I've already seen it. I mean, I'm sitting there living and breathing this shit every day. So the point is that we've got to align the interests with the marketing folks. But what's really interesting about us is we don't do any marketing, and we're found because we're that authentic, genuine voice, and the data's coming directly from these guys. Right? So we'll take a last question,
I
and
just
then
had a practical question about what are the tools that you like and use to manage remote workers or as a remote worker?
Well, I guess I'll start quickly, but I think the most important thing for me is the high quality communication stuff. So we use a lot of Google Meet. We use this like they're preferable almost every time. You know, sometimes people dial in, but I don't know. I mean, I don't care whether someone's sitting in their lazy boy at home or what. It doesn't really matter. You know, I mean, a conversation's a conversation. I can see their face. I can see how they're feeling. If they're stressed out, or maybe they're having a good day, or whatever. It's nice to be able to see that. So I mean, I think for us, that's probably the most important tool. We try to do that whenever possible because we do have some folks that are remote. And then I love also complementing with a kind of semi-asynchronous communication. So I hate email. I'll be the first person to say I think it's monstrously destructive to productivity, and I think I'm a bit of a contrarian when it comes to that. But I love Slack. I love how it's this nice blend between like immediate and asynchronous. So we use the heck out of that.
To harken on the visual aspect, we have a remote team. All of us are in Charleston, but we meet up only twice a week. So the other times we're on video. I've been pushing for almost mandatory on video, and I don't know if that message is getting across appropriately. And thank you for putting it into certain words. Would you also suggest almost like 99.9% of the time you ought to be on camera?
Yeah, but again, I think you have to kind of de-stress that for people before you say that. It's
right,
like, hey,
right.
But you don't have to be all made up, and you don't have to I don't care if you took a shower this morning or not. It doesn't really matter to me. Your hair can be messy. You can have bedhead. It's about the mission. It's what are we trying to achieve. I don't really care whether you're wearing your pajamas or not. You can still do your job just as effectively. So I think when you kind of, back off of it, because people come. It's funny, like how intense video. Oh my God, I'm gonna turn my camera on. I better be all put together. You don't really need to be. And
But you have to have good lighting.
Yeah.
Do not run a video conference from home with bad lighting. You look terrible, and it's the only thing people maybe know about you.
even if you just gotta go mess your hair up in the mirror, to kind of like bring it down for everybody else.
Yeah. You have to have good video. You have to have good internet, good Wi-Fi.
I appreciate all of you coming out today. Just keep you on schedule, and feel free. Just a couple of things. Anything we produce, Mike will have it on video, and it'll be online on Monday. Number one. Number two, if there are topics that are kind of relevant, it's as simple as Fridays at charlestondigital.com, digitalcorp.com. That gets to us. So I appreciate you coming out, and just any thoughts you might have random about my point about doing something for co-working and getting people together. I find them to be I find the co-workers to be I don't mean this in a in a prejudicial sort of way, but sort of a cut above. I just enjoy my conversation. So selfishly, I want more interaction. With guys like you, and gals like yourself. So let us know what we can do to help. I appreciate you coming out. Thanks to you guys.